Ken Colquitt. I'm the program manager for Diversity Scholar Engagement. I manage the Diversity Scholars Network, a scholarly community operating within the National Center for Institutional Diversity at the University of Michigan. The Diversity Scholars Network is proud to present this two-part series which explores how storytelling, counterstory, and embodied pedagogy disrupt white supremacy, patriarchy, imperialism, and academic spaces. To respond to the question, how can autoethnography serve as a practice of resistance in higher education? Today we have part one, entitled Radical Love, Autoethnography, and Decolonial Pedagogies. How can educators employ language and storytelling to resist colonial paradigms in higher education? Within this series, Professor RAsheda Young explores transformative teaching practices that challenge oppressive educational structures. Today's event will begin with a presentation from Professor Young. After her presentation, she and I will engage in discussion on the transformative teaching practices she's gone into detail on. And once all of that's done, we'll open up the discussion to all of you. But before all of this, a land acknowledgement. The University of Michigan is located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people. In 1817, the Three Fires Confederacy made the largest single land transfer to the University of Michigan. This was offered ceremonially as a gift through the treaty at the foot of the rapids. Through these words of acknowledgement, their contemporary and ancestral ties to the land and their contributions to the university are renewed and reaffirmed. And now it is my honor to introduce Professor RAsheda Young. Professor Young.
Hello and good morning, and thank you so much, Keenan, for the introduction and for the opportunity to submit my scholarship. And hello and welcome to the community. So now I'm going to share my screen and then we'll get started from there. That's not the screen I want to share. 1 second. Okay. So that's the screen that wants to be shared, but that's not the screen that I'm going to share. And so as technology does, just give me 1 second as I get set up. Okay, so the title of my presentation, Teaching at the Intersections, Autoethnography, Linguistic Justice, and Radical Belonging. I am RAsheda Young. I am an assistant teaching professor at Rutgers University, New Brunswick. Before I begin, I want to tell you a little about myself, and these are my whys. So my first why is my daughter, Amaz. My second why is my son, Malik. Both of them sustained me, and both of them keep me focused and grounded. So I want to first start by telling you a little about me, and that is that I have 2 children. There are 2 philosophies that will ground this presentation, one of which is from James Baldwin on love. And on love, he says thus, love takes off the mask that we cannot live without and know that we cannot live within. I use the word love here not merely in the personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace, not in the infantile American sense of being made happy, but in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and growth. And so what I'm going to ask you to do with me today in this moment is to go on a quest with me. I am going to dare you to see a different perspective and to grow as you continue developing your teaching arsenal. The second that grounds my teaching philosophy is this idea of Ubuntu. And now let me tell you, I have always thought that I have been a teacher who grounds herself in compassion, of love, and transparency. But it wasn't until my study this summer in South Africa that I actually learned of this term, Ubuntu. And so an anthropologist proposed a game to some kids in the African tribe, and he put a basket of fruit near a tree and told the kids that the first one to find the fruits would win them all. When he told them to run, they took each other's hands and they began to run. They sat together, enjoying their fruits together. And when he asked them why they ran like that, as one could have taken all of the fruits for oneself, they said, Ubuntu. How can one of us be happy if the other ones are sad? And so the way that I think of Ubuntu, particularly in this example, is that if I eat, you eat. And if I do not eat, you do not eat, that we are in this together. And so Ubuntu is the belief that we are defined by our compassion and our kindness towards others. So the kids, they personify this idea by saying, no, one will not win. We will all win and we'll do it together. And so I carried this forth as I continue thinking about ways to internationalize my course, because I'm always looking to expand myself and expand and develop. And so I began looking into the SUNY COIL program, which is Collaborative Online International Learning. And through them, they have this model where two institutions pair together. And so the professors collaborate, they decide on an assignment, we partner, and then we develop ways of engagement for our students. And it has received significant press, it meaning COIL, and this methodology. And so some have described COIL as a way of creating transformative experiences that focus on intercultural and international diversity. And so for me as a teacher scholar, I want to always create intercultural opportunities as a way of developing empathy. And through this, I had developed I designed a research study. So folk in the room who know about IRB, sometimes it can take one or two. In my case, it took 4 chances before it actually got approved. And so the design of this study was to explore how incorporating autoethnographic counter-literacy narratives, stories that dominate perspectives on literacy, can enhance students' critical thinking, engagement, and understanding of diverse experiences, especially through collaborative online international learning platforms. And so I designed a questionnaire, designed all the stuff that you design when you're designing an IRB, I had to design in order to get it approved. And so through that, I use particular scholarship. And at first, this quote from that was in All About Love by Bell Hooks, it says thus: when we reveal ourselves to our students and we find that this brings healing rather than harm, we make an important discovery that intimate relationships can provide a sanctuary, a sacred space where we can be ourselves. And this kind of unmasking, like the unmasking James Baldwin mentions in the beginning, is sacred activity, which allows two souls to meet and touch more deeply. And so for me, one of the reasons that I am transparent is that I ask my students to write really personal stories. And so if I'm asking you to be personal, I share some of myself too, especially my literacy narrative that I wrote when I was in grad school and having to learn legalese. So for me, this idea of being transparent right from the beginning, it helps my students dig more deeply as well. Linguistic Justice by Dr. April Baker Bell here at the University of Michigan. When I started grad school in 2020 for my PhD, we had to write an autoethnography. And during 2020, what was happening? We had George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, um, Breonna Taylor, and I was I was walking mad. And when my professor, Dr. Christina Sanchez Martin, when she said she gave an assignment on teacher identity and introduced me to her scholarship, I was like, this is it. This is exactly where I want to go. I was able to use music and videos and lyrics that spoke to the anger that I was feeling and subsequently to the music that was popping around that time. I was able to include that. And that assignment essentially became the foundation of my doctoral work and subsequently my career by looking at myself as a teacher, as a Black woman, a Black mother, a Black scholar. From there, Goldie Muhammad, Cultivating Genius. And in her approach to cultivating genius, she talks about 5 essential tenets that we need. We need to be thinking about how our students seeing themselves in the assignments that we create. So identity, what are the skills that we want them to learn? How are we stimulating their intellect, their criticality by forcing them to think about things that cause friction? And in the friction, to borrow from my colleague Carla, in the friction, that's where we learn. That's where the true uh, rethinking, repositioning happens. So I began thinking about ways that I can create assignments that foster types of criticality as well as joy. Now, joy also isn't we running through the muck and everybody is getting A's and we're happy singing Kumbaya. Sometimes joy is producing your best work and earning that really hard-earned C and making students feel like there has been growth. Growth is the joy, not always the grade. And of course, Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed, when I am developing a sense of consciousness in my students, an awareness of themselves, of others, and then creating an awareness of a problem in the world and developing some type of way to address that. And Yolanda Sealy Ruiz. She's a professor from Columbia University, and it's through her scholarship that I really began to focus on how we as instructors have to dig first inside of ourselves. We have to look at our biases, our decision making, our assumptions before we can say that we can engage authentically with our students. And the foundation is critical love. It is a profound ethical commitment to caring for the communities we work in. So the students, as a teacher, the students that you work with, do you know about them? Do you know anything about their culture? Can you do a quick Google search to find out something and then integrate it into your lesson? And then humility, remaining open to understanding the limits of our own worldviews. So I'm going to tell you a real funny story and then, quickly get back into the slide. So when I first started, most of my students in this particular class were multilingual. And so at the time, I played a BTS song, right? And I was like, yeah, And my students all looked at me like, what is this? And so the assumption was my Chinese students could understand Korean. So I had to humble myself and I had to go back to the drawing board and I had to think of other ways of connecting. And the big lesson that I learned there is do not assume. Critical reflection at the end of every single semester without fail. And throughout, and I'll show you examples of that as well as we think about decolonializing our syllabi. I do a critical reflection. What worked? What didn't work? And I'm asking my students throughout the semester, what works? What isn't working? Because I could have thought that I delivered a bomb lesson and it could have bombed in a way that I didn't want. Archaeology of the self. That's when you do your dig. Again, going to and figuring out who you really are. And then interrupting racist practices, right? So what are some of the assumptions that you carry in and could have possibly internalized about different ethnic groups? I wanted to give Dr. Celie Ruiz the opportunity, meaning to play her video and she could explain it herself. But for the sake of time, I am going to move on. But what I want you to get from the archaeology of the self, as coined by Dr. Ruiz, Dr. Celie Ruiz, is the importance of having a genuine love for the students that you work with and learning about them, being willing to accept correction. A person who cannot accept correction is saying that he, she, or they are not willing to grow and do the work. And then to interrupt by doing critical self-reflection, some type of ways of looking at yourself to determine if you have any of these biases, if you have internalized any of these biases, and how that could be possibly affecting your interaction with your students. And when we think of, from Dr. Ruiz's work to Dr. April Baker Bell, even my mentor, Christina Sanchez Martin, when we put them all together, it actually represents Ubuntu. It's a cycle back to the beginning of my presentation. So it is essential elements of forgiveness. Through forgiveness, right? I had to forgive myself for thinking that just because my students present as Asian, they are going to understand all of the Asian languages of a particular region. I also had to think about what are my other students experiencing. So if my student is always late, instead of having an attitude when they come in, maybe 5-10 minutes late, instead I smile. We don't know why they are 10 minutes late. And I smile and I say, thank you for coming, right? We have to have integrity, morals, values, showing essential elements of caring, respecting our students, humanness. And when we put all of that together, all of these ideas create this idea of Ubuntu. And at the center of that is love. And at the center of love is this perseverance that we are committed to helping not only our students, but also ourselves from getting to the finish line. And sometimes around this time, I am playing, I'm blasting in the car, Bon Jovi's We're Halfway There, because sometimes that's how it feels, that I am just living on a prayer. But we are committed to getting to that finish line. So that was essentially my literature review. Those are some of the texts that make up my teaching philosophy. And so with that, I took all of those ideas and came up with this 4-step approach to how I was going to engage and create these assignments with my students. So step 1, my DUT students, Durban University of Technology students, they were added to my course, but guess what? There were some technological issues. So we had to figure out a different way to have them engage, and it wasn't through Canvas. Instead, it was through free software like Padlet. We also did some team building. I'm going to show you examples of the team building exercise that we did. the writing phase, and we use Duduzile Mambaso's text, The Mother Tongue and the Poet, and which is she's a South African writer. And then step 4, students will give a presentation of their work. We're still working on that. And literacy narratives, autoethnography. Why did we choose this? Number one, it helps students be more metacognitive about their learning. Like think about what you're writing about. Why is this significant? Additionally, it helps students integrate learning about writing into their prior writing knowledge. It's a scaffolding device. In other words, it provides a structure to help us leap into or move into differently rigorous work, but they are learning the skills of rhetorical choices, rhetorical moves, various literary devices, how to critically self-examine, and that goes back to the archaeology of the self. So it's a great way to build foundational skills that you want students to take into another lesson. Additionally, it opens a problem space as coined by Charles Bazerman. The greater the challenge of the solution, the greater the possibilities of cognitive growth. And so learning ain't always easy. Learning ain't always going to be fun, and students may fight against particular topics. And I write about this in a book chapter where I had a student write to the dean of my department about the assignment. And I was like, oh, okay. And my student said, in a multilingual, and you have to think about cultural differences. You come from a society that is literature based, and now you're switching all of that up and asking them to write about themselves. And so my student was um, hesitant and almost like, I don't want to say angry, but was a little angry that they were having to write about this particular topic, but he stuck with it. And at the end of it, wrote me a nice letter about that assignment. So learning can be described as a shift also in perspective. So it's a problem space where students are now having to think about different topics that relate personally to them that they might not have thought a college space or an academic space would welcome it. But in my class, it is. Additionally, students are analyzing the rhetorical choices of text. We're going to look at some of the texts that I use. The value of literary analysis, metacognitive knowledge of the writing process. So they're learning and thinking about their writing as they're going through the process. I provide opportunities for them to reflect on their writing. Reflection is so important. You got to think about Toni Morrison, she says, if you want to fly, you got to give up the shit that weighs you down. And so we think about that shit and we write about it and we explore it. And then lastly, sorry about that. Sorry about that. I want to go back there. Okay, so we connect research to lived experiences, and I'm going to use myself as an example. In 2020, there was sincere sadness. I have a son, and I wrote about a time my son wanted to go outside and he wanted to play with a toy gun. And I was like, I thought about so much about him just wanting to go outside and play with a toy gun. And immediately my mama bear kicked in. And I thought that's the same way Tamir Rice died, outside playing with a toy gun. And I had to think about that. And I was able to go through that thinking process and that emotional process and that labor in my paper. And so I want to explain the rationale because I want to put out there, I want to explain right off the top that some of my literary choices cause discomfort, and they should. everything, college space is not a place for agreement. It's a place where you do disagree. But my job as an educator is to teach you how to disagree without being disagreeable, how to be open to a different perspective without attacking the person sharing his or her, their perspective, and to be open to hearing, but I can still disagree. So the rationale is that each text responds to, and these texts are Hines Hall, F the police, shoot to kill, responds to systems of oppression and injustice. These authors challenge their given dehumane status and the status of marginalized people through song lyrics. And as astute cultural critics and griots, they are able to safely articulate the challenges that the racial and politicized landscape it presents to them. Their literacy narrative, from Hines Hall, F the police, shoot to kill, imposes a critical stamp on their environment and legitimizes their critique of police brutality, apartheid, the Palestinian war, South African student protests, and the necessity of student encampments. Their texts take on issues of racial discrimination, linguistic justice, a person's mother tongue, police violence, white supremacy, and suppression of journalists. And this was my rationale that I entered into when designing the following assignment. Some of the topics that we look at are students' rights. So as of April 11th, Mahmoud Khalil, a permanent resident, was involved in protests at Columbia University in New York. It was said that an immigration judge in Louisiana found on Friday, meaning Friday about 2 weeks ago, that the Trump administration could deport him, granting the government an early victory in its efforts to crack down on pro-Palestinian demonstrations on U.S. college campuses. Mr. Khalil, a Columbia University graduate and legal permanent resident, will be deported. And so in class, we talk about students' rights. What are your rights? And why do we talk about this? Because if Mahmoud can be targeted in this way simply for speaking out for Palestinians and exercising his constitutionally protected right to free speech, this can happen to anyone over any issue the Trump administration dislikes. So we look at students' rights. What are your rights? We also look at students' rights as it relates to Rumisa Ozturk. So I asked my students, do you know about her? Silence. Maybe 2 or 3 students raised their hand. And so what we know about her is that she is a PhD student who was detained by federal agents. And so this clip is about 1 minute, and I want to show you this clip.
On Tuesday, federal immigration authorities detained Tufts PhD student Rumeysa Ozturk, who is a Turkish national here on a valid visa, according to her attorney, and took her into ICE custody. Video obtained by The Globe shows plainclothes immigration agents approaching Ozturk as she's walking on the sidewalk in Somerville.
So here's how I talk about it with my students. I said, imagine you protesting against wearing red, and you write an op-ed in your school newspaper saying that you protest or that you are against wearing red because for the following reasons, right? And I said, now just imagine you being 2 blocks away from your university campus and then unmasked mass agents who do not have any type of credentials displayed take you away. How do you feel? So we talk about that she is one of several foreign nationals affiliated with prestigious American universities to be arrested for purported activities related to terrorist organizations amid the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. They include, like we just talked about, Mahmoud Khalil, a prominent Palestinian activist, taken into custody this month outside his Columbia University apartment, as reported by CNN on March 28th. And students need to know what's happening on other campuses because it affects them. At Rutgers University, where I teach, as of April 9th, about a dozen of its international students, as reported in NJ.com, international students who were all in good academic standing, had their visas revoked. 12 of them. And so this is not just something that sits far away, but in my research, when I look at counter-literacy narratives and autoethnography, how do societal events impact your identity? And how can we as instructors create spaces for that writing? And so I make the connection. And I make the connection to students' rights because remember, I have a COIL that's happening at DUT. I asked them to think about and make connections to possibly what's happening in other schools or in other parts of the world. And so in 1976, there's a Soweto uprising. And so I would like for us to listen to this brief description before I give you more detail. And this is something else that we watched together in the classroom.
Soweto under fire. The country's largest township had a dark cloud hovering over it. June 16, 1976, presented a new form of resistance towards the Afrikaans language policy introduced under the Ubuntu education in 1953 under the then apartheid government. It was under Ubuntu education that the then apartheid government spent 644 rands on a white child's education as opposed to a mere 42 rands on a black child's education. It was such inequalities, coupled with the Afrikaans language being enforced on black students, that led to a revolt. On that fateful day of June the 16th, what was supposed to be a peaceful protest by black students against the Afrikaans language policy turned ugly. Police fired at thousands of protesting students, killing 176 of them and leaving thousands injured. It was such inequalities fought by the youth and political movements that paved the way to a new political dawn in South Africa.
And so why is this video important? In 1976, 100 plus students were killed, and that's probably low because it's out in popular media. 100 plus students were killed, more were injured because they did not want to be, because these students took a stand and said they did not want to be taught in a language that was used by their colonizers. Instead, they wanted to be taught in English. So not only was Afrikaans the language of their colonial oppressors, Afrikaans evolved from the Dutch, spoken by South Africa's first European settlers. And so 20,000 other students from Soweto high schools decided to hold a protest. And this image taken by Sam Nzima, and if I mispronounce his name, someone in the chat correct me on it. He took this picture in secret because the government did not want this news to get out. So what they did, so he took it in secret. What you see over here, this is the sister on the left, and he's her brother is in his arms, Hector Peterson, and Hector Peterson, he died, and he died on his way into a car by another protester who simply tried to get him to safety, but he died on his way. And so the students who were there in 1976 protesting because they took a stand. They did not want to be taught in Afrikaans, and so they began singing a song, which is now their national anthem. But when they began singing this song, this is when bullets rang out. So think, as students started singing this song, what happened is that a policeman started firing on unarmed students and began killing them, thinking that no one was going to get the word out about this tragedy. So now that we've had that heavy, how did I connect Ubuntu to the writing project? So the first project for Rutgers in our college writing program is a reflective essay. And so for me, the way that I teach this is through a literacy narrative. And the first thing that we do, though, is that we define identity. What exactly is identity? And so identity, a part of identity is your name. And so we look at a student who is reenacting Maholeng wa Selepes, my name.
My Name by Maholeng wa Selepe. Nomgqibelo ngamisile ngqibisa. Look at what they have done to my name, the wonderful name of my great-great-grandmothers. Nomgqibelo ngamisile ngqibisa. The burly bureaucrat was surprised. What he heard was music to his ears. But as died, say no fear. I am from Chief Dalukolo Velaigoja of Emamponweni, and my name is Nomgqibelo Ngamisile Ngqibisa. Messiah, help me. My name is so simple yet so meaningful, but to this man it is trash. He gives me a name convenient enough to answer his whim. I end up being Mariah. I, Nomgqibelo Ngamisile Ngqibisa.
Now this poem is important for so many reasons, one of which I learned that some of my South African friends have two names. They have their South African name, and then they have their Christian name. And so depending upon the situation, they will use their Christian name because some folk can't say their South African name. And then I'm like, well, I guess you're going to choke on saying my name because you're going to learn it. And that's the first way that you create a humanizing experience with your students, is when you know and learn how to say their name and not reduce it to a name that you can say. And then it loses all of its flavor and its regalness. And again, for the sake of time, I won't show you Uza Aduba's her her memory of her asking her mother to change her name, but I will give you the summary. And she's like, if they can learn to say Dostoevsky, they too can learn to say your name. And so we create this name story where I take part of it as well. And I give them, and so did the instructors at DUT. And so I love this particular student's, her the way that she helps us learn how to say her name. And so the assignment asked them to, give 5 descriptors of who you are. Again, decolonializing, again, creating the space of love. And so I asked them to say their name, and this is how she does it.
Hello, my name is Zama Kube from Ghana, and today I'm going to teach you how to pronounce my name and surname. My first name is Zama Kubevu, and it is pronounced as Za Ma Kubevu. And my surname, which is Mbukane, is pronounced with a strong B, like the B for bubbles. So we have a strong B. So it's Mbukane.
Now, I don't have the clicks yet, but I was so thankful that she took the time to help us learn how to say her name. And we do that with a free app, namedrop.io. So once everyone shares, and then we also do, we read Sandra Cisneros, my name. And so all of this is team building. And so again, right from the beginning, I am creating an atmosphere of respect, an atmosphere of love, Ubuntu, dignity, I see you, you see me. I'm giving them, I'm showing them that I want to say their name correctly because their name has meaning. So tell me the story of your name. And all of this, once we get into the assignment, it comes from the C's, Students' Right to Their Own Language, as it was created in 1972, published in 1974, in which they say that, we have to teach students and the language that they should be able to use the language that feels most comfortable to them if we're trying to break away from colonial practices and supremacist practices. I agree with this, and I provide opportunities for folk to use language that feels most natural to them. And the way that I think about it is that language is a tool. So if we look at a tool like I am unscrewing a light bulb, right? Am I going to try to get this light bulb out with a hammer? Okay, probably not. I'm probably going to shatter it into pieces. Though that is a tool, that is an inappropriate tool. And language is a situational tool, but yet we should provide situations as instructors for students to use their home language. And so Duduzwile, she wrote, let me stop acting like we friends and calling her by her first name. Duduzwile Mambaso, she wrote a story in Our Words, Our World, and she talks about being able to write in her mother tongue and reading in her mother tongue and what that did for her as a South African woman who mostly was introduced to white European men. but how it unlocked her gift for poetry once she was able to read different poetry in isiZulu and isiBongo, which connects to Gloria Anzaldua's How to Tame a Wild Tongue, Chicana American woman who shares also her experience of writing in or reading literature in Chicano Spanish. We talk about Hines Hall. Why do we talk about Hines Hall? It's a narrative. It's a song of protest. And if we can talk about and make room for other types of literature, why can't we make room for Hines Hall? And then we also look at NWA's F the Police, a literacy narrative. And this is a literacy narrative that talks about particularly their experience being young Black men in Compton, constantly being harassed by police. Now, while my student demographic at Rutgers University is largely not Black, does that mean that there isn't universality in the experiences of Chicana, South African, and Black Americans? Yes. Should they be introduced to it? Yes. Have I experienced resistance from it? Yes. My response, oh, well, you're going to learn today. And so we continue even, and I want to show you Julius Malima's, his response. This is a protest song. And in this protest song, he's saying to some, depending upon how close you are to the experience and how far away you are from the experience, that could be seen as inflammatory. But dependent upon your position, it challenges you to grow as James Baldwin asked us to do. So I'm going to explain it. After we look at it together, we're going to take a collective breath and we're about to get into it. So as we get into it, we're going to think about how these lyrics.
When I'm fit. Skichi. Sofa skichi. Kichi kichi. Kichiba. Kichi kichi. Kichiba. Sibram konto. Alaye. Sibram konto. Alaye. Shoot to kill. Shoot to kill. Come on, sir. Kiss the poor, the farmer. Kiss the poor, the farmer.
Now, for me, I'm going to tell you, every time I hear that, I get so amped. Now, here's why. So similar to NWA, when the Congress tried to get them to not play that song, get it removed, create all types of roadblocks, NWA said, no, we have freedom of speech. And what Julius Malema did in response to AfriForum, who took him to court to prevent him from singing this chant, he said, no, kiss the board. That's actually a reference to the immorality laws, where it was against the law for a Black man or woman to kiss a white person. A Black person could be killed for that. So kiss the board in defiance, shoot to kill the farmer. The farmer is not, he's like, you're trying to make us be barbarians and say that we don't have control of self, that we're not going to go out there with guns and shoot people. No, that's what you think. Actually, what we're going to do is we're talking about the symbolism of the Boer, the symbolism of oppression and white supremacy. It must go. So he, much like NWA, like Macklemore, Gloria Anzaldúa, Duduile Mambaso, they all take a stance of self-definition around language to go back to the seas. We don't have time for NWA. I'm already over time. And so the literary narrative assignment, I'm hoping that I can share this with you. So boom, I'm prepared. So I'm sharing some things about me to give them a model, and I share how it's frustrating for me as a black woman and as a black professor, sorry for that, and as a black professor, the expectation that I'm always supposed to be on, like when people find out, oh, you're a professor, I gotta watch what I say around you. And I'm like, no, you don't. I'm off of work. I'm relaxed, but there's this expectation. And so one of my students also, she wrote about hair, the language of hair, when her hair is straight, what that communicates to others versus when she chooses to wear her hair natural, what that communicates. My student Kui, she says that she now feels more confident embracing my name and its meaning for recognizing who I am. And she says that after reading the assigned articles in class, she had that experience. And then we don't have time, but I just want to show you this beautiful post written by one of my South African students who talks about how growing up in a Zulu speaking household, what that does for her, and how when the perception of speaking in English, how that's considered to be like more formal, you're more educated, but yet when she's able to speak in the language that feels natural to her, what that does for her. And I just want to read this part. This hybridity felt practical, Zulu and English. Yet it sometimes sparked guilt, a sense that I was diluting something sacred. My grandparents' rich proverbial Zulu felt words apart from the slang-infused, abbreviated version my peers and I often use. I was like, okay. Still, I cling to Zulu as an anchor. Speaking it connects me to my ancestors and evokes a visceral sense of belonging. When I hear traditional songs or attend ceremonies, the language feels alive, unbroken, but I've also made peace with its evolution. Today, my Zulu is a mosaic woven with borrowed words, modern slang, and the echoes of my grandparents' proverbs. It mirrors who I am, rooted yet adaptable, traditional yet irreversibly shaped by a world that infuses static boundaries. In this balance, I find both loss and liberation. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And I respond like a reader. And so my other students, they respond as well to some of their South African colleagues. And so this Padlet is just a beautiful way of engaging with students across the ocean and created opportunities for empathy. We don't have time for part 2. That's just showing you that I use graphic organizers. Students' response to writing this, rate the degree to which the statement is true. When we first assign a literacy narrative, I had very little understanding of what a literacy narrative is. Overwhelmingly, folks said they didn't know what it was. And let me tell you something, folks say literacy narrative is not rigorous. If you feel that way, I promise you, you're teaching it wrong. I rate the degree to which the statement is true. Now that the literacy narrative is over, I have a better understanding of what a literacy narrative is. 83%. Now we have a significant shift. Many of them didn't know, and now 83% of them feel like they know what it is and have a better understanding. And what helped them get this understanding is that my feedback. That's another way that you develop empathy and you're actually engaging in decolonial practices. When you respond to your students as a human and as a reader and have reader responses, I write LOL or WTH. I'm so confused. And so by responding like that, I'm responding as a person. And so how do we humanize learning? You want to give anonymous surveys to your students, and I do. So one of my students unfortunately committed suicide. And from that moment, I now build this survey in 3 different times a semester. I ask them, what do I need to know that I don't? And I tell them that it's not just about this class, but it's also about you helping me understand what am I doing? Like I could be thinking I'm doing something great and you're like, no, not so much. Let me know that. Tell me when I'm confusing you. I want to know that as well. So decolonial practices, uh, be humble in action by asking for feedback throughout the semester. I ask my students to assess my teaching practices. How do you feel about me using your student samples? And by me asking them this better helps me again figure out how I can respect all of my students. A lot of them said it works for them, but then some of them said, hey, look, I don't like what I gleaned from this is when you don't ask me beforehand, even though it's anonymous, I don't like it. And so now that lets me know I must apply that same practice to everyone every single time before I share a portion of their work. I give brain starters at the start of class. And these brain starters, when I feel stuck in my paper, I want to know, what do you do? So I give this to them at the beginning of class. They're all typing. They are giving each other, they're becoming the experts. And so my quiet students get to participate by giving advice in a non-confrontational, non-confrontational and in an anonymous way. And so they give great feedback and then we talk about it so they can get ideas from each other when they feel stuck. And then I provide opportunities for students to be the experts for each other. So when you get distracted, what do you do to regain focus? This is important because in the age of 1 minute, 30 seconds attention grabbers, how do you stay focused through a dense article? Again, becoming experts for each other. So I give this to them right at the beginning of class so that they are given an advice and they ain't always hearing me do all the talking. Also, you must know your students' names and pronounce it correctly. You must show genuine interest in your students' lives. You got to be human, being flexible, differentiate instruction as necessary, be empathetic. So the questions that I want to leave you with that I would like for you to think about, how are you creating safe places in your classroom? How do you foster a sense of belonging for your students and underscore faculty? In what ways do you diversify your scholarship as you are designing your assignments? And what specific ways do you encourage your students to say in class, I don't know? And how do you show up for your BIPOC faculty? How do you foster love and honesty? And how do you define your teacher identity? And as I close, I want us to think about words from Martin Niemöller, a priest who says, first, they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me. And there was no one left to speak for me. And so I just want to close by saying thank you to folk who helped me. And that's my mentor, Dr. Barbara Gleason at the Language and Literacy College at the College of New York. Dr. Missy Watson, who encourages me to embrace my voice and my love of music. My dissertation chair, Dr. Daniel Weinstein, who has been patient with me through this process. My mentor who introduced me to autoethnography, Dr. Christina Sanchez-Martin, as well as to my other mentor, Dr. Gian Pagnucci, who said, Rasheda, narrative inquiry is the thing. You're good at it and you should do it. So I want to thank you so much for your time and for your attention. And I welcome any and all questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Well, that was fantastic. We have a good amount of time for us to have a little discussion and pull in questions from the audience. I think we can do both at the same time. So the first question I have for you, and this has been great. Thank you. I'm so happy that the recordings worked out well. We were able to find the clips and put them in the chat so everyone has those as you were going through. But Professor Young, as an assistant teaching professor at Rutgers University, New Brunswick, a PhD candidate in Indiana University, Pennsylvania, you talked about your positionality. You talked about yourself being a mother. Uh, can you tell us more about how your interest into education informs how you present this information, how you teach, how you practice bringing everyone to the same level in class?
Great question. So I think, who would I have needed as a freshman? Who would I have needed as a sophomore or junior in college? Who would I have needed my teacher to be for me at that time? So that's one of the questions that I ask myself as I begin teaching. Who would I have needed? And so I try to be that person for my students. And so I think about, like, we carry home with us everywhere we go. It's inescapable. We bring our experiences everywhere. And so instead of me trying to be, let's say, like, instead of me trying to be, I'm gonna make up a name, Beth, as an educator, I can't be Beth. I can only be the best RAsheda that I know how to be. So I had to get comfortable with making mistakes and looking at mistakes as learning opportunities for me. So, like I said, using that BTS for my Chinese students, they were like, what is this? Though they knew them, they didn't know the lyrics. And
Right.
so I had to, like, humble myself and be open to feedback, to be willing to open myself up to suggestions from my students, and to take the me out of it. And, you know, so does it work all the time? No, but it works most of the time. So I'm able to borrow from my children, keep me current too. Like, they think I'm real corny, and I'm like, but people think I'm fire. Okay. So, so but they do, they keep me current. And sometimes I run ideas by my children and they're like, okay, yeah, mom, do that. So you have to find the thing or the things that work for you and be open to continuing on doing those things. And then to learn how to be flexible and to, like, change the things that might not work for you. Does that make sense? Does
Gotcha.
that answer your
No,
question?
no, it really does, and I appreciate that. Just kind of setting some groundwork for some of the questions that I'm seeing and some of the discussion I wanted to get into with you. You know what? We went into talking about positionality and all these things, and we didn't even go through and explain it a little bit. I can hear. I remember reading bell hooks challenging people on their use of language when it separates folks out. So I guess let's back up a little bit. Quick fire explanations. Positionality. What is it and why is it important?
Okay. So there, you it's going to come to me, the brother name from Harvard University. He wrote the text, and somebody could probably look it up and tell me. He wrote the text, The Conversation. And the way he explained,
Oh,
is called The Conversation. Look, somebody is going to somebody is going to put it in the chat. But he wrote the text and it came out in 2020.
okay.
And so the best way he explained it was, let's say everybody gets on a plane. And when you get on a plane, you got folk who are sitting in first class. They don't know how they got in first class. They just know they enjoy their position. There you go. Thank you, Robert Livingston. Thank you, sis. So you don't question your position about how you got on first class, but you know that you enjoy all the perks. And then you see other people getting on the plane. They're going to the back. Their conditions aren't as good as yours on the plane. You don't know how you necessarily earned your position, but you know you don't want to give up your position. And so the way that I think of positionality is examining your footing, your in the world, in the classroom, and thinking about what were the factors or the influences that may have gotten you there. Similar, kind of, it's a little different from entitlement, but it's a way of thinking about how you earned your seat and what is your seat on certain issues, from not moving when you are walking, when you got two people walking, who moves first, right?
Hmm.
That's your position. Who do you expect to move to make room for you on the sidewalk? That's a position. To how did you earn your position in the as a leader? Was it because of your complexion, or was it because of what you know? So the way that I think of position is examining your seat, the ways and the ways in which you got there. So it's an
Got it.
examination of your seat.
So your place in society and the power and privilege that is aligned with that, earned or unearned.
There you go.
Okay, all right. So I mean, since we're getting into a little teaching, pedagogy, I mean, you gave a lot of great tools for instruction and learning, and you've kind of, talked about intersectionality a bit, but how do those terms, pedagogy, intersectionality, really inform some of the things that you're doing in your class?
Okay. So pedagogy, let's think of it as what are the research, the ideas, the tools that inform the way that you teach. So in the beginning, I explained my pedagogy as being rooted in love and being rooted in compassion and dignity. I then went on continuing to explain my pedagogy by giving a brief sample of the texts that make up my literature review when I began designing assignments. Intersectionality, if we were to borrow from like Kimberly Crenshaw, if we were to think about what are the things like gender, race, class, your socioeconomic status, you're right there in the middle. How do all of those factors contribute to your marginalization? So the intersection, when we come at the crossroads or when we're meeting right there in the center, how do all of those factors again contribute to make up and define your existence, your practice? One, like the way that I do as a mother, as a woman, and as an educator. How do those intersections of those things help to define who I am? And I'm always very aware of that.
I love those discussions of intersectionality because it kind of gets to the fact that not only do you have these intersecting identities, they're not very easy to pluck one out and say, this is how I see things as a Black person. Well, no, this is how I see things as a Black woman, as a Black man, as someone who's cisgender. I mean, all of those things kind of get together, and you just can't pull one out by itself without tugging on the rest of them. It really informs your holistic view of the world. So I
Yes.
wanna I wanna get a little bit into, I was reading Positioning Radical Love Through Narrative Inquiry to Foster Transformative Language Identities in Multilingual Classroom. I don't know if you know the author, because it was you. But I was left with a couple of questions from it, and we have this text available, so we're going to go ahead and drop that in the chat. But I was really interested because you talked about a lot of great things, and you really were vulnerable and going through and saying, hey, this is some things that I've learned, and these are some things that I picked up. I'm interested in your perspective on English. Um, become an official language of the United States, or if it does become the official language of the United States. I think that was an executive order. I think there has to be a little bit more done in order for that to be completed. But what implications do you see for our multilingual students, our international students, our students from minoritized background, if something like this goes through?
Thank you. So I have to give a shout out to Dr. Sanchez Martin, who also co-authored that article that you just referenced. And many countries have an official language. So like, for example, South Africa has 11, 12, if you want to talk about sign language that has just been introduced as the 12th language. Do I take issue with English being recognized as the official language? No. Do I take issue with the way it can be used and or manipulated to further marginalize and remove resources from people? Yes. So if we are going to make English as the official language, but remove translations from, let's say, like the White House website, that might be problematic. If we are saying that we are not going to make available translation services for folk who are in, let's say, a hospital, that might be problematic. So when we make a language official, we still have to make room for the other branches that exist within society. So a tree just doesn't exist because you just see the tree. The tree has roots. And where are these roots going to? Where are they going to take us? And so we have to think about where will this executive order take us? And that is more of the work that needs to be done. But the C's in 1974, and students' right to their own language, they embraced the English as being the language, but not the only language. And that's the thing that I would take issue with. So to be clear, do I have an issue with it being the recognized language? No, but we must make room for and celebrate other languages as we are looking at celebrating the richness of our society.
You know, I appreciate that. And I really think that some of the undertones that I'm hearing from that answer resonate through much of the things that you were saying. Speaking about the power and privilege that comes from systemic oppression. I mean, and you brought up South Africa as an example. Afrikaans is considered on a different level than a lot of other languages, and I think that's problematic. I mean, you spoke to that in one of the examples of one of the students questioning why we have to learn in this language. There are a bunch of official languages in South Africa, but which ones get priority? And I think that's really something to consider. Back to this paper, because you wrote it in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. How did that setting affect your positionality, how you saw things, how you presented information?
To be honest with you, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I was so angry. So first, let's just be real. So and I know that this is being published, but all of us, I'm hoping, are adults, but we can use profanity. It was a clusterfuck of an experience. And so I'm saying, so I started this, I started this new job. Okay, so people agree with me. Okay, great. Thank you, y'all. So in 2019, I started this new job at this big university, and I was like, yes, let's go. And then I had personal deaths that happened. Then it was like 2020 came, and it was like, all right, we might be back 2 weeks after spring break.
Yeah.
Okay, right? Then we got an email. Nope, that's not happening. We're not coming back until the end of the semester. Okay, but wait, Now we're going to be shut down. So I was like, what? So now it forced everyone who was everyone, you had to learn, how are you going to teach online in like a matter of months? How are you going to have this presence? So I had to learn, how am I going to teach online? I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I didn't, and my teaching evaluation showed that, and I'm gonna be so transparent. I was teaching from a Chromebook. Then I started grad school, and I was just so happy that I started grad school in 2020 because I learned how to do it. I learned from Christina. I I learned from Dan Weinstein. And these professors were like phenomenal at what they did and showed me what I needed to do to be better. And then I read scholarship, particularly from Dr. April Baker Bell. Then I was introduced to Carmen Kennard. And I was like, it just really just helped me as a Black woman to know that there were other Black women out there who had the same experiences I did in white academia. And so it helped me feel less crazy. It helped me feel like I was a part of a community. And then I was able to, I created like a list of goals that I wanted to see happen in my classes. And I was like relentless with it because that 2020 spring, it was such a clusterfuck that I was determined to not have the same experience happen again. And so I had to lean into me. I had to really understand what worked for me as a student. I attended every single workshop you can possibly think. If it was a workshop, I was in it. Because I wanted to be better. And so how did COVID-19 shape me? How did it shape that paper? George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, my son asking me, could he go outside to play? They weren't light.
Yeah.
And I was angry and felt unsafe as a Black American. And I just remember during that time and feeling isolated but connected. I would go to Dr. Baker Bell's talks, and we would be up in that chat. Like it was life in that chat. Dr. Yolanda Celia Ruiz, life in those chats. And it was what I needed. I needed to connect to Black people and Blackness in a way that was elixir to my spirit, and it was.
I am remembering everything we went through. I was teaching as well. And luckily I was teaching remotely. So the shift wasn't crazy, but we had hybrid setups and it was a very hard time. So I appreciate your candor. One of the questions that we had, and I think this is a good transition, because the question is, you alluded to this, but what do you do if your students don't feel like they're connected to the content? They can't speak directly to it. And I really think this is important because you mentioned that many of the students that you work with are predominantly white, and you're talking about a Black experience and how it's important for you to have had that support. So how do you connect the two? I can see it and I've heard it in some of what you said, but I mean, this is a great time to sum it up so everybody gets those nice takeaways.
We expect people to connect to Shakespeare.
We do.
He's dead. He speaks a language that many of our students don't use.
We do.
Okay. We ask our students to read
Chaucer.
yeah, come on, right? We have the expectation because we say that it's universal. So I have the expectation that the authors that I'm introducing, that their experiences are universal. I don't teach it that it's a deficit. I teach it the same way and have the same approach that you would teach these other authors that you expect folk to just get. Well, if you can get them, you can get them, right? Period. Full stop.
You're the code switching is very difficult right now. I'm just saying. Oh man, I appreciate that because there's so much real and unbridled to it. So in our last few minutes, if you were to take everything that you said, wrap it up, put it in a bow, and make it small enough to be presented in 2 minutes, what did you want everyone to take from this presentation?
Embrace you. There is room for you. Embrace your students. There is room for them too. Embrace your mistakes. They create you. Love who you are. It's what God has made you. Feel all that you feel and know that all of your feelings are valid. Give space and give yourself grace because it is so needed. Think outside of the box because our students need you. They are coming to you. Embrace I don't know because it frees you. Get involved, know who your students are, have a journal, reflect on your teaching practices, think about your assumptions because students are coming, they are relying on you. And feel comfort in the silences in the classroom. You don't have to know everything. Free yourself from that. Say, I don't know. Students respect that more than you acting like you do. Embrace who you are. There's room for you. Embrace your students. There's room for them too. Embrace divergent views. It what makes us unique, and continue every day just being your best version, knowing that every day your best version looks different. That's what I would say.
I'm being intentional here. I want that to resonate, so I'm gonna leave a little space there. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for walking right through any technical issues to present something fantastic. And I appreciate your honesty, your candor, and your openness. Thank you and sharing yourself with us. This concludes, but you can't be having me crying up in this. This concludes part 1 of our series, Radical Love, Autoethnography, Decolonial Pedagogies. How can educators employ language and storytelling to resist colonial paradigms in higher education? Please join us for part 2 of our series, which is entitled Autoethnography in the Classroom as a Site of Resistance. How can educators create inclusive anti-oppressive learning environments? And it will feature a presentation discussion from our friend, Dr. Liz DeBetta. And thank you all for joining us today. We have some survey that we'd love for you to take to help us continue to get better with our presentations, and we hope to hear from you in that. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Till next time.